Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to the panelists with me and the moderator, because they're all based in Europe, and we're very glad that they actually could make it, although it is relatively early for them. We had a fantastic session before with a keynote around data management and data analytics and breaches in data, etc., etc. And we stay on this topic a little bit more. And then especially around the big data, the data overload, and how can we really manage that? And we have great speakers for that. So without saying much more, because I want to give them all the time they have, around 30 minutes, I would like to introduce you to Mateo, Jarrin, Cuvi, who is going to introduce his session. Good luck, guys.
Uh, Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Mona, very much for the introduction and for the invitation to participate in this session. I'm going to be brief too, because we know we have a tight schedule and we have half an hour, and I would like the gentleman to speak as much as possible regarding facing data and how RegTech can come to the rescue. Before getting started, I'm going to ask both of our panelists to quickly introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their themselves and their business and their experience with data in the financial services. So, Olus, can you please go ahead and give us a brief introduction?
Hello, everybody. Hi, Mateo. Thank you for the introduction. So I have an institutional banking background, actually, where I worked for 16 years within brokerage, clearing, and custody businesses. And since a couple of years now, I moved to the dark side of force, or the technology side, where I work on the of data regulatory projects with asset managers, insurers, and banks throughout Western Europe.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Olus. Harm?
Hello. Good morning, everybody. My name is Prins. I'm the founder of DEX Data Explorers, and that's a company which is busy with regulatory reporting. And we started that company, primarily for the reasons that we're going to discuss in this session. So we thought we can do this better. Before that, I was a program manager at some data management projects at financial institutions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Harm. As for myself, I forgot to actually mention who I am and what I do, but I am Mateo, and I am the Global Manager for Partners and Media at the Association of Governance, Risk, and Compliance. So that's who I am. I'll be here moderating the session. We have 7 questions to cover during the next 30 minutes or so. So let's start with the first one, and let's try to set the scene. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of data, and in particular, its quality. So what's the role of good quality data in the financial services? Olus, do you want to get us started with that one?
Asking the question is point is, I believe that you will agree, and for this is answering it. At the moment when we talk about data, most of the organizations or financial institutions mainly are frustrated with it because there is this, there is this concept of data, but there is no context to it. So there are lots of data around our massive processes. But the point is that most of them are facing what I call a data chaos because the mindset is still on the mainframe or local processes with, between systems. And everybody's they want to, but they miss a bit the context on what they can do with data.
You froze there for a second. Harm, you want to jump in and share your take on this?
Yeah, what I see with a lot of financial institutions, that these people are merely surviving, actually. And they're trying to cope with all the problems they have with the data. And what you see is that the burden is only increasing because you have some new regulations where whole new types of data are being requested. For example, SFDR, which is about sustainability findings. It's a whole new set of data that is being requested that is currently not being collected by a financial institution altogether. So it is a challenge. I'm currently in an implementation in an institution in the Netherlands. Yeah, well, the implementation of our solution wasn't the big work, but it's solving the data quality issues of the source systems is what we're busy with at the moment. That is what you do in a project.
Yep.
So I think, yeah, that is, and I think, yeah, the audience will recognize that.
I think both of you touch upon good points too that will bring us to our next question. I mean, you're talking about data chaos that Olus mentioned, and also about all this new sort of data that is being requested that Harm brought up too. So the next question is, let's get into the more practical side of things, I guess. So in this day and age, we are fed with data coming from so many different directions. How can RegTech help overcome the burden of handling multiple or large amounts of data? Harm, you want to get us started with that one?
Yeah, well, there's. I think the load, the volumes isn't so much the problem because, well, with the current hardware and software, you should be able to handle large volumes. But it is the different sources where you have to cope with. And yeah, what you want to have is a sort of standardized communication means which you can use to collect data and also distribute data. So what we try to do is to, for example, with our solution, we try to make it as clear as possible to the client what is needed. We give them standard input formats that they can use, so the division of responsibility is very clear, so they can focus on delivering the data. We do the rest, and that is how you try to accommodate it. We try to help them with providing standardized code sets that they can use in delivering the data. So it's all about standardization. We try to enrich data. For example, in a lot of regulations, you need data from financial instruments that companies often don't have themselves. And so what we try to do is collect that data and provide it for them, so they have a sort of reference to the data set. So it's all about standardization and enrichment of data, making it so as easy as possible. That is what I would say would help.
Excellent. Olus, anything else to add to what Harm has said, or your take on this?
Yeah, well, point is, Harm, for example, mentioned SFDR, which is the regulation on the finance. For example, a company, you have two assets that you're involved. You, as a money investor, for example, you need to be every of the assets that your fund is invested in, which means that you have to continuous basis. And point is have the information on it, how there is standardization to it at all. So this need to have a news to make sure that data is processed, but all of data also a need for standardization, because otherwise everyone get lost and you lost credibility vis-a-vis the industry, I would say.
Thank you. Excellent. Moving on, again, another practical question in terms of RegTech and how it can help, I guess, practitioners and companies out there. So the question is basically, how can RegTech help curtail information loss, particularly when it comes to dealing with data overload, multiple communication paths, and manual data curation? Olus?
Yeah. So that's a good question, Mateo. Well, one of the projects that I'm in for the moment is that, and I believe that within the audience, most people will recognize themselves, is that we have a very complex IT structure within an asset manager, where more than 120 systems are trying to discuss with each other. And when there's a new implementation of a system, the risk management team said, okay, I want to have every quarter, every 15 minutes, an interface of data in order to make sure that our risks is assessed on a daily basis. And then the IT and the software provider said, yeah, but we're actually on a batch-based interface, so it's a bridge and not a hub. So you see, point is that for the moment, the mindsets are different. As I said, I'm more on a business side of it. So the business requirements, the regulatory requirements is continuous information. But on the other hand, what is done is that most of the interfaces is based on a manual basis. So people take some data and put it in Excel spreadsheets, try to make some risk assessment or compliance or AML, you name it, analysis, and then try to see where we're going. So it's a bit of blindsided process for the moment. So the natural path of advancing is going from the bridge setup to actually hubs where the databases are exchanged to a platform that's the ideal way where actually all the organization have the same information at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's interesting what you tell. I've got the same experience. I was once at the bank program director for a data management platform, and the ambition was to build a data platform for the whole company, for the whole, for all purposes. So for marketing, but also for regulatory reporting. But what you learn in such a project is that the requirements are different. And so in marketing, they want to have it quick, like you said, or risk. But especially marketing doesn't have to be accurate to the cent. But you want to see trends, you want to see what people are wanting, about clicks on websites and stuff like that. And on the other hand, you have the regulatory reporting spectrum, where when you have a difference, you get questions from the Dutch National Bank or the European Central Bank, in our case. And so that's a different audience. And but it's one tool for different audiences. And when you set up a structure like that, you should be thinking about it. What is the purpose that you want to use it? Because at the end, when things get tough, then it will turn out to be that your platform will only be used for regulatory reporting, because the other people will say it's too slow, like you say, or it's not what I want. If you don't watch out, so you should have different speeds in your data delivery. And I think and that's what we see. So the RegTech is often at the end of it. Once had a project manager, he said, well, who was implementing a RegTech solution, and he said, well, I feel like someone who has to install a kitchen in a house. When I come in, everything has been done, but the walls are not right, and the outlets for the electricity are not in the right place, and the money is spent. And that is often the case, that you have you're working, you have a very large data warehouse project to prepare for everything, and then you want to do your regulatory reporting. It's at the end of the timeline. So when designing your project, you should be catering for different speeds and different groups of people who are going to use your data. I think that so it's not so much even the RegTech itself, but the whole setup in your company, I think, which should be you should take this into account, I think.
Yep, some very good points there, Harm. Excellent. I know we already mentioned standardization, and we talked a little bit. Harm mentioned it, and Olus had mentioned it earlier too. So let's look at setting universal standards. For when it comes to data, it seems to be the way forward. And so I want to get your thoughts a little bit on the use of standards for communication, taxonomies, and data models, such as, for example, BIRD, as it pertains to data. Harm, do you want to get us started with this one? I know this is a question that you had suggested covering, so I'll let you go ahead first.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that the audience doesn't know what BIRD is, but BIRD is an initiative in Europe, promoted by the Dutch of the European regulatory instances, the European Banking Authority and the East European Central Bank, and ESMA, so this is the market authority. And what they did, they started a consortium together with some large banks in Europe to define a data model for regulatory reporting. And so if you populate the data model, then you should be good for the most important regulatory reporting sets. And that's has been going along now for some years. And so it's a very extensive data model. So yeah, what I see happening here is that suppliers will cater to that and see to it that they will be able to create standard interfaces to their data model. So, and that makes it actually currently at the client, they are building a data warehouse, and we also suggested, why don't you take the BERT data model, because that is where everything is going. So that is one example of standardization where because yeah, you can hire an analyst and design it yourself, but that has to be a very good analyst if he wants to do it better than a whole collective of banks that have put all their experience into that. So there's a lot of knowledge there already, and all the code sets that you need are in there. So there's a lot of work already done there, and I think that should be very beneficial for going forward in this kind of exercises.
If I may add something on this one, I agree what Harm says regarding the standardization. I think that we indeed need a level of standardization at some point, because there isn't any. So it is, as we have all agreed, it's the data chaos for the moment. But the point is, and for example, for ESG matters, EU taxonomy, SFDR, etc., I think it's good to have some standardization to get some efficiency and the data structure to it. But if we go too further on the standardization, I believe, and I don't know what the audience or yourselves will think, is that there's also a systemic risk on it. If actually all the systems are following the same assessment, the same structure, I'm saying, okay, then we don't have any alternative. And I think that the current image or the current positioning where we have several small RegTech software players or data warehouse models, it's also something rich, where actually you have the alternative and you can compare and you can actually propose other models. So not everybody is using the same model, the same assessments, and fall into the same traps sometimes. But where's the median? I agree with Harm, and on this one I also have some concerns. If you have one standardization for everything, then a systemic risk can fall in.
Yeah, well, I would say that this standard would be used for the, let's say, the bread and butter reporting that you have to do, where we earn our money with, and that you yeah, of course you can add your own flavor to it for your own risk management. But actually, what I see often, that the risk management often is not busy with risk management, but with risk reporting, because they, like I said, they are surviving. They're trying to cope with all the regulatory demands, and they don't have time to do what it was designed for, and that is the management of risk. They're just reporting it, and that is and so if a standard can make life easier for that aspect of your work, then you have more time for the other stuff, what your department was intended for, I would say.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, at least to have at a basic level some sort of standardization, and then, kind of be flexible enough to allow companies to bring in other sort of data points that they want to work with, etc. Yeah.
Exactly.
Excellent. Moving on, we have we got extended. We have another 5 to 10 minutes additional to our wrapping up time, so we have plenty of time now. So here's another question that Harm had suggested, so I'm going to point this one at him. Is there a need to develop a solid and deep marketplace for the sharing of data? What is your take on this particular issue, Harm?
Yeah, like I said before about SFDR and ESG, there's a whole new set of data points asked, which are not collected at the moment, which generic data points, for example, about the sustainability of certain investments, or even about the salaries of board members. That is even, are there also data points that are asked in that in such a regulation? Well, I can imagine that individual companies are not, let's say, collecting that at the moment.
Right.
What you see is that large data vendors are jumping on this. It's not a coincidence that Mr. Bloomberg himself is in the board of this whole SFDR thing, because he sees opportunities here, I think, and rightly so. But yeah, so what is happening now is that there's popping up a lot of specialized vendors who are collecting this data and selling it to the different companies. But what an alternative could be is that you, as a business, you create a marketplace where you can offer your own data to and get from other companies, get their data points. So you at a sort of bartering principle. So you could use that. Well, we suggested that last year, but so it's more a question for me than that I think it should happen. But what we saw is that a lot of companies are still sitting on that data themselves. So they're still going to pay the money, I'm afraid.
But you're absolutely. I think you're right. I think that there must be a in-depth cultural change within financial institutions, for example, for that, because as I was mentioning earlier on, most of the organizations are on the analogic side, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. But point is that there is this concept of data, and the context is still missing. So. Most of the head of data or strategic data advisors within organizations are actually people coming from risk, audit, compliance, or people who have actually no idea of what data analytics or data science is. So how actually you can then, nowadays everybody's saying, okay, we have data, let's try to sell our data, let's become the next Bloomberg or Reuters,
exactly.
etc. But point is that how, what, when, in which structure, and this actually is the beginning for the moment. It's not because you say, I want to sell my data. Then you have to put some digital native or an agile and decentralized organization where you will actually create a data analytics or data business or units to advance on this area and move to the digital mindsets.
Yeah, exactly. That is a sort of a broker institution which defines the interfaces. That is what should be needed. But it always starts, of course, with some willing clients to develop this, and maybe it will come out of this ESG initiative, because I must say that started on the right foot. There was a taxonomy defined already. There's a lot of documentation about it. So all elements to set something up are there, but what you need is some companies willing to invest in it and to work together to do this, and also willing to share their data. That is the greatest challenge, I think.
It's like, if I make just one last point, is you're absolutely right, and Mateo too, is that for the moment we're talking open banking for years now, because everybody's saying, okay, there's open banking, but what are banks or asset managers putting on the clouds? It's really a very tiny part of their data or their information. So we're not there yet at all. And indeed, if you don't share the data, you cannot standardize or you cannot sell your data at some point. So it's only the beginning, but it's going in the right direction, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to what you guys are saying, my main kind of not concern, but my main thought that popped up was, are these companies actually willing to share that data? Because I mean, it's such
Yeah,
a prized
exactly.
possession. Is it something that they will actually want to? I mean, of course, if the money is right, I don't see why
Yeah,
not. But but
yeah.
yeah, but that was my first thought. Okay, we have two questions left. Let's move on. And another practical question that might be of use to practitioners out there. But as the number of regulations to be followed and the scale of the paper mountain increases, costs for
Mhm.
organizations are moving northwards. How can RegTech help overcome these problems and provide organizations with cost-saving, efficient solutions? Olus, you want to get
Mhm.
started with that one?
Yeah, I think we all agree that the regulatory compliance and risks management systems cost is between 5 to 15% for an organization, roughly.
Hmm.
As we mentioned, it's becoming all the regulations now, the storage, exchange, reporting, and analysis of data responsibility is within the actors from the regulators saying, guys, please do it and give me something that I can use and I can assess you with. But the problem is coming from the fact that I don't know you gentlemen, but all of the data projects that I'm managing as a program manager, not more than 99% of them is senior management saying, "Oh, we're struggling with compliance or risk. Let's buy a software." And then they actually we say, "Okay, this unit will use this software, right?" And then it's actually a local initiative, and the users, the end users, have not the initiative do not come from the end users, and then they put their due diligence and their procurement process, and they just actually send hundreds of pages of service level requirements, etc. And once that's the poor RegTech software is being selected, then the user gets it and says, "Oh, what am I going to do with it now?" And the implementation and the usage, I don't know you, but I've been in operations, and my first point is that if I'm being asked to use a new software, is that, oh, everything is working fine. Why would I use a new software? So, but if the initiative would come from the end users in a more decentralized and agile way, where you actually have IT, risk, sales, business operations coming together and say, how can we make our lives easier? Then it would go quicker, I would say. And I think it's a shift of mindset rather than coming from the upside. Make sure actually that the initiative comes from the downside, and then I think the adoption and the platform usage of data and technology will help on this area. I don't know if it's clear, but it's actually the change of mindset that's important, I think.
Yeah, I would like to add to that any data program that is started from within IT is doomed. It won't succeed.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Everybody out there, if
Totally.
you're from IT and you started a data program, you're doomed. Stop it.
Yeah.
It's always
Or
the
management,
case.
IT and management, huh? IT and management. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I had the luck that I participated in the program at a pension company in the Netherlands. It was started from the business, and me coming from regulatory reporting asked, are we also taking on regulatory reporting? I say, no, we're not at the moment because that's quite of working. We want to give them something new. And then when we have adopted that, then we will do the regulatory reporting. I think, well, that's normally it's the other way around. So we've got a letter from the Dutch National Bank. We have to do this and this and this, and then we start the project. But here it was we want to give them something new and new stuff that they can really use, and then we start. Then we do the other stuff. But coming back to your question about the increasing load of regulatory reporting and the new regulations, also here I think standardization would be helpful because in Europe the new regulations are often published in data point models. So these are data models that are cover everything that are in the regulations. So the data points, the possible code values. stuff like that, the interface layouts, validation rules. And well, what you see is that also these data point models, also based on the BERT experience, are converging. So they're using the same taxonomies, the same code sets. So at the moment, it is possible to, when you have, for example, one regulation and a new regulation arise, but which, well, a bank is only so large, so there's a lot of overlap in data points in different taxonomies. So what you can do is make an assessment of the overlap in regulations, which data points are common. So, and that would give you insight also in, okay, what I have to do to change my setup, so to accommodate for this new regulation without having to do everything all over again, because often it's point solution. We built a solution for this regulation, or we built a solution for this regulation. But often it is, if you have a common data set that you can use to cater for both, then it could be much more efficient. And I think that is where RegTech can help to provide the insight in the overlap of regulations and how you can define your interface setup so that you can make use of that overlap in an efficient manner. So, apart from, of course, all the business stuff that you want to do it, but this is specifically for RegTech that it could help.
Excellent. Okay, we have one last question that I want to use as sort of a conclusion to this session. I'm going to open things up afterwards for questions from the audience to see if anyone has anything specific for either of you. But let's look at the future. And, RegTech and the use of data are here to stay. That's obvious. But where do you see this relationship between RegTech and data moving towards during the next 5 to 10 years? Harm, do you want to give us your take on this?
Yeah, well, what I was wondering if the audience can help us on this is, of course, we have a whole field of crypto and stuff like that, and what you will see is that will come under regulation too. And you see large financial institutions adopting this technology too. So I think that is a whole new field of gathering data, what we have to delve into. And I'm wondering, if anyone has already had experience with it, or what their thoughts are, because for me it's a big unknown at the moment. But I think that will be the next big thing.
Right.
You mentioned crypto, Harm. Now it's getting passionate, huh?
Yeah.
We have 2 minutes left.
Yeah. Okay, good. It's a reality we have to deal with, I think.
True.
Yeah, certainly. Olus, anything else you expect moving forward for RegTech and data?
Yeah, I believe that's the article that I wrote for the RegTech Black Book. It was actually what exactly about this question is that RegTech is becoming data tech actually, because of the fact that, as we discussed throughout our panel, and I believe that all the audience will agree, is that all of the regulations, the responsibility of data and analysis of data lies on the actors, regulated actors, which means that we have to make sure that our compliance, risk, ESG processes make sure that we rely on this structured data, harmonized data, and processed data. So I believe that, indeed, that's around the data models and data analytics that everything will move on in the upcoming years. That's the trend that I'm seeing nowadays within the regulated industry.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to open up the floor for any questions that might come from our listeners. If there are no questions from our listeners, I want to thank Emona, and I want to thank Harm and Olus for this very insightful conversation on data. So we'll give a few minutes to our listeners, and otherwise we'll say goodbye. I know it's lunchtime for most people elsewhere.
It's breakfast for us.
Breakfast
but it's
for us, yes.
You're right.
Seems like there are no questions. Everything
No,
was
I think
crystal clear.
you guys were quite clear. But I do agree that I think a lot of people are also having some lunch, and I assume you would like to have another cup of coffee. Um, but thank you very much for this, guys. It was super insightful, and I would definitely recommend to read the article of Olus as well in the RegTech Deckbook, because he has written quite a bit about data and the analytics and the way forward. So thank you very much, and over to you, I think, Carlson, because you are going to lead the conversation around the pitch with the lunch break. And yeah, see you guys later. And
Yeah.
I will be in Europe within a few weeks' time. Hopefully, I see many of you. Okay, bye bye.
See
Excellent.
you. Have
Thank
a
you very
nice
much,
day.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye.